Last week we heard the story about the transfiguration on Mount Tabor. Christ leads his most intimate students, Peter, James, and John, up high in a mountain, and there, in the surrounding circumstances of nature, he is being changed. So much so that they have incredible experience, spiritual, physical experience. They see him emanating light. Christ is being changed in front of their beholding eyes. It is described as something that takes place in a particular setting of nature. We know it's a mountain, there is a cloud that appears, a very, very vivid picture. It's not necessarily something that is only taking place in the inner vision. It's almost as something from the inner life transpires and is being visible to the eye. This is almost like a first seed of something that weeks later, in the life of Christ, many months later, will find its resolve, its higher octave, one can say, in the event of ascension. Transfiguration on Mount Tabor and ascension of Christ, they belong to the same axis. They're polar. They belong together. What is the unifying element for us is just that mystery, that something that typically would be considered a part of the inner life, inner vision, maybe mystical experience, here becomes available to human senses. Of course, as such, it is a very different type of spirituality. It's a very different type of experience. On the other hand, a very big question to our modern scientifically oriented mind. How are events that are contrary to natural order happening? How are we to understand them? That's one question. On the other hand, it becomes a precursor again to a grand split, whereby big amount of Christianity is not so much interested in connecting mystical experience with scientific facts. And they basically say, beginning with the Catholic Church, it's miracles. They are miracles. They're things that the human mind doesn't have to really permeate and understand. You have to just believe in that. Or even more radical approach is that of evangelical churches, American Protestant churches. That's just how it is. It's a human being standing there and starts shining light, or Christ is being taken literally in physical body into the spiritual world. So, as you see, there are branches and branches of possibilities, confusion, arising from these situations described in the Gospels. But the root of all these problems and discrepancies is always in us and not in the Gospel. That means human being of our times, our soul, operates on a very particular paradigm, or operates according to a particular paradigm. It's a materialistic paradigm. And if you have sensitivity, if you're a sensitive soul, like most of us here gather on the altar inevitably are, then you are left somewhat, again, split. You're a thinking person, you would like to understand that, but there is not so much science about it, actually. So this is just a prelude to what I'm trying to bring, and the prelude, and it will connect hopefully to the ideas that I'm presenting to you, because as much both understanding of these events in the Gospels, physical, spiritual, and what I'm bringing are very different if we approach them from the point of view of the Goetheanism, Goethean sciences. And you perhaps know that at the very basis of Goethean science, or one can say Goethean observation methodology is what Goethe himself called it's a long German word. Anschauende, Urteilskraft. It's one word. It's Goethe, incredibly creative as he was able to combine three words, three concepts and activity. Anschauende, Urteilskraft. Urteil is mind. Urteil is judgment, is ability to conceive, to conceptualize something. Kraft is force, power, and Anschauung is literally beholding, is to see. So beholding, seeing, thinking, and power are combined in the Anschauende Urteilskraft is the ability to see thoughts. Literally to see, to perceive thoughts. And typically when we think about thinking, of course, we are turning inwardly. Even if you are able to think about thinking, this is something quite new. If you were able to do that, we turn inward. And we agree, according to modern epistemology, the science of how we know, that out there, outside of us, is the world of things, objects, forms, something, and in us is the source of recognizing what it is in our thoughts, in our thinking. And as a bridge between these two worlds are the senses. Not only 5, but, Steiner spoke about 12 senses. For Goethe, it was different. And it was so much different that he literally was able to see thoughts presenting themselves to him as a beholder in forms of nature, in events of life, in processes of the world. And that's why Rudolf Steiner liked him so much. And not only that he devoted most of his work to Goethe and unwrapping Goethe for us, but he even called the central building, the center of the anthroposophical movement worldwide, Goetheanum. It's a great tribute to this amazing observer, thinker, Goethe. There was a lecture in Jena, University of Jena. There was a lecture about biology. And Goethe, of course, was very curious. He was fascinated about everything that is new in the world. And at that time when he was alive, sciences really broke through this shadow of Middle Ages and authority of churches and so on. And people were really heavily in their discovery mode. So Goethe attended one such lecture about science of biology. And after the lecture, he realized when people were leaving that his contemporary, Friedrich Schiller, another great German poet and thinker, was also at this lecture. And they knew about each other, of course, very well. They knew of each other, but they never met. And here they are, those two pillars of their time, of cultural heights, Goethe and Schiller. And they connected about the content of the lecture. They both really were inspired by what the lecturer was saying. And when Goethe realized that Schiller is able to conceive of the content similar to what he was thinking about, he found it encouraging and he started opening to Schiller, and he described to him his perception of the plant. This is something that we know today as the archetypal plant. Full of enthusiasm and energy, Goethe is describing this plant, and Schiller attentively listening to him wholeheartedly. And after Goethe finished, Schiller looked at him and said, well, but what you're describing to me is an idea. The living, metamorphosing being of plant. He says, today would say, you can't see it with your eyes, it's an idea. You can know this. And Goethe got really upset and said, if this is so, then I see ideas with my eyes.